a pleasure for me to be here today and be a part of this TEDx talk at Queen's University. It's an honor actually to be asked and talk a little bit about broadcast journalism. And it's nice to see some folks. I'm so happy when I meet people that watch the show. Just a few minutes ago, I was out in front and one of the gentlemen out there said, it was so great to meet me. He said he wakes up with me every morning. I was worried. And this other woman, and she was very kind, and she said, oh my goodness, you look so much smaller and younger in person. And I thought, it's a great compliment. How big and how old do I look on camera? And I usually say my stock answer to that is if a camera puts on 10 pounds, we have 4 in our studio. So it's kind of easy for me to talk about that and take the compliment for people that are used to getting up early. And by the way, I know some of you, this isn't the best time getting up early. I'm glad that they warmed you up this morning. My alarm clock goes at 3:15 every morning. I call that stupid o'clock. And every morning when the alarm goes off, I literally say out loud, you've got to be kidding. But I get up and wander through it, and I wanted to talk to you about piecing together from your life experiences to school and walking through how I established my career in broadcast journalism, first in radio and then in television, and also as co-host now of Canada AM. I get to tell amazing stories. I get to allow people to come on and tell their stories and give them a voice. People, many of them you know very well. Some of them you never know who they are, but I really believe and I'm passionate about news and current events, and I think everybody is. It affects all of our lives, no matter what profession, no matter what job we're in. We all are storytellers, and we're all journalists, and never more than today with social media, we can be citizen journalists. I think it's so salient to everything that we do to be aware of the news and current events going on around us in our community, our country, and of course, all over the world. I wanted to be a journalist, I think from a young age. I was very, very passionate. And when we talk about piecing things together, I like to talk about the building blocks of putting those things together so that you get that foundation. And in my foundation, there's 3 that have guided me throughout my career, and that's perseverance, passion, and patience. I call it the 3 Ps, and I think that those 3 Ps, like journalism, permeates all of our lives, no matter what profession we're in, business or the arts, music, Steve talking about curiosity. That's at the heart of almost all of us, because we want to be curious. We want to know more, we want to learn more, and we want to do more. So that guided me through in my curiosity for news and current events. I always wanted to be a part of my family discussion. They were very big news consumers and had all kinds of really brilliant discussions at the table. When I was young, I used to think that they were fights over news, and my dad said, no, we don't have fights, we have spirited dialogue. And I wanted to be a part of that dialogue, so that propelled me to go into communications at York University. And then after that, I went to Seneca College in radio and television broadcast, coming out wanting a job in radio. And I was told by everybody in the industry and outside of the industry that there were no jobs, that I would have to find something else and maybe one day get there. And the one thing is, again, you come back to perseverance. And I did that, and I took some really crummy jobs along the way so that I could be in radio. Some of the people that I've spoken to over the years at Canada AM have given some amazing advice. I talked to Pervez Musharraf, who was president of Pakistan for 7 years. He was also a military leader, and I talked to him about his book a number of years ago, and he said, most of the people were against me writing this book, but like a good military leader, I took the decision against the major part of their advice. I didn't take the advice of a lot of people to get out of the industry because radio was not going to be what it used to be. Television was everything. The business was changing, and there wasn't going to be a job. I stuck it out. I took rotten jobs. I eventually got a job in radio, and I thought I'd hit the big time. It was in Newmarket, north of Toronto. And it was in a small strip mall underneath a laundromat. It was not very good, and that was great because I was terrible. And I don't think anybody was listening. That's not true. My dad listened. And I know that it was an Olympic year, and I was getting ready to do the news, and the DJ said, we have 2 free tickets to the Leaf game tonight. People still wanted to go to the games back then, really. And we will give them to the first caller who can correctly identify, he said, how many rings are in the 5-ring Olympic symbol. He put his hand over his face, he looked at me through the glass, and I started to laugh. Nobody called. And I don't think it's because of the Leafs. I don't think that there was anybody but my father who was listening, and he definitely didn't want to go to the Leaf game. That, for me, was my starting point in Newmarket. A few months later, I was fired by the news director for not making enough copies of my newscast. I was devastated. I went home, and I think I sobbed for 3 days. This dream job that I had had was gone. And patience, perseverance, and passion, those blocks that I kept moving around to piece together, seemed to be breaking all over the place. I didn't give up. The program director came back, found out that the news director had let me go, and he wanted me to come back. And so with my tail between my legs, I had to go back and work for this person who couldn't stand me and had fired me. And I used that job to get another one. I knew when I walked through that door, I was only going to use this job to get out. And I was fortunate, I pushed, I waited, and I got a job in Belleville Radio, which is really where I kind of learned the craft of reporting and being on the radio and having to cover things like the Conservation Authority and make it interesting for people. And then I used that job after a couple of years to get a job back in Toronto in radio and CFTR in those days, now known as 680 in Toronto. The news director hired me onto the night shift, but as part of my training there, I had to do an update on television. It was a multicultural station. It was the 68-second news break, and I went and did that. I was working there maybe almost 4 weeks, and I got a call from somebody who identified themselves as a manager at CTV, local Toronto television, wanted me to come in for an audition. And I was very polite and very surprised and hung up the phone. And I knew I had probably been punked by one of my college friends, so I didn't call back, because I thought it was a joke, and I thought I'll get Peter later for that. Anyway, they called again. I went in, I auditioned. I was terrified, and I was terrible. But somehow they saw something, and they brought me on as a reporter. So through the patience and the perseverance on their behalf, shoving all those building blocks together, I was beginning to get a foundation. I now had radio experience, and I was about to get television experience. And television reporting was really hard. I was a little too female for some in those days, definitely too blonde for others, and a little too small to be taken seriously in a political scrum. And that was really hard. It kind of breaks your spirit a little bit when I was getting the fashion stories and the pet adoption stories, and and you sail through, and eventually you get that break. And I started to really learn more about the craft of television reporting. One day I was leaving, and I was so excited that I actually had done a stand-up, being that I was on camera, for a story that was going to go to air. And I was on the phone with my dad, and I saw the vice president coming down the hall, and he looked angry. Well, he was always angry, but he was particularly angry that day, coming down. He grabbed my arm, he said, "Our anchor didn't show up, we need you now." In those days, the newscast went to air at 6:30. It was 6:21. And I had this mohair sweater on, and I needed contact lenses. I'd never anchored before. I ran into the bathroom, and I'm trying to put my lenses in like this, and one of them goes up in my eyelid. And he's bashing on the washroom door, and then he grabs my arm, and there's about 7 stairs down to where the studio was, and I fell. Flat on my face, I couldn't see, and he picked me up by the back of my shoulders. "We've got to go!" And he's, without a word of a lie, shoved me in the chair on the desk. There was no time for makeup. I couldn't even dress the cable. The cable for the microphone was sticking down the front of my shirt. And the co-anchor turned to me and said, "What are you doing here?" And I like this, And the show opened, rolled, and I got through it. I did it for an hour. I was so thrilled that I could do that. And I ran into my college buddy the next week, who was a cameraman at another station. The guy I thought who had punked me to get into CFTO, he said, "I saw you anchor." He said, "Way to go, awesome, it was fantastic." And he said, "But can I, one piece of advice?" And I said, "Oh my God, any piece of advice, tell me." And he said, "You can blink when you're on the air." And I realized I probably didn't for an hour. And I'm not sure I ever really moved my shoulders. So again, I thought I was terrible. Eventually, I got a little more experience and was elevated to weekend anchor. Weekend anchor then it got me a job leaving CFTO and going to Global to anchor the supper hour newscast and rework what they had done. And that was an amazing experience for me, and I loved it. But then CTV called back, and they wanted me as part of their morning show as a co-host. And I was thinking of all the things that I had done in my career that had gotten me to that point, because at any point, you can't develop an ego in this business. So I didn't think that I was really all that good. And when I think of some of the people that I've talked to over the years and the advice that they have given other people, I would think about Jane Fonda, who I also spoke with, and she said, if you allow yourself, you can become stronger in the very places that you've been broken. And Barbara Walters said, work harder than everybody. You're not going to get there by whining. You're not going to get there by shouting or by quitting. You will get there by being there. And sometimes being there is the opportunity that you need and you're looking for. And that's what happened when I went to Canada AM. I have been very blessed in my career, and I've had a lot of bad moments on the air. At Global, Y2K, the world was supposed to fall apart. They wanted us all on the air. So it was a live broadcast to talk about the chaos that might happen, the theories. The broadcast went to hell in a handbasket. There was no audio, then they couldn't find any tape. They would throw to me to fill, and they'd leave me up there. And I was mumbling, and I couldn't get it together, and I had to throw to Peter Kent. Nobody told Peter that they were coming to him, and he was skating outside. And the clock struck midnight. We were waiting for the chaos. There was, of course, no chaos. Nothing happened. The only tragedy that night was our show, and we got panned in the media. It was the Gong Show, I believe, was in one of the headlines of Peter and Bev that night. So fast forward to Canada AM, some of the things that I have learned is patience, perseverance, and passion. And those building blocks have stayed with me. I want to share with you a couple of things. Some of the people that I've been able to talk to that I had mentioned that and some of the people that you don't. One of the challenges that we have in storytelling is trying to get something out of a subject that maybe you haven't heard before. Hillary Clinton was in town. I was given the only Canadian interview with her while she was here promoting her book. Everybody and their sister had asked her if she was going to run for president. Everybody and their sister knew what she was going to say, that she hadn't decided. But I couldn't go into the interview and not ask that question. I had to figure out a way that might be a little different. Or a grandson on the way, potentially. Right. Very exciting. You've even said you're in a good place in life. Why would you consider running?
Well, that's a great way to ask it, because most people ask it the other way. And I think you have pointed out, I've got other exciting things happening in my life. I'm thrilled about being a grandparent. I don't know how that's going to feel. Why would I do it? Because I also really love my country, and I have served it in one way or another for a very long time. And I think we're at a turning point in our politics. There are so many hard choices facing America.
By the way, I think she's running. But that's just me. Giving people a voice, allowing people to tell their story. This clip that I'm going to show you now is, to me, it was really compelling. Michelle Knight was taken as a hostage by Ariel Castro. And she was held there for 14 years and sexually abused, miscarried his baby, had a baby. She was so young when she and two others were taken hostage. She is a broken woman who's struggling to find a voice and who wrote a book. And as frail as she seemed, she had such a big story to tell, and I was blessed to be able to ask her questions and have her tell her story.
People make tremendous mistakes. No matter how big or small they are, they make mistakes. And the key is to learn from them, not to feel hurt by them.
And when he found out you were pregnant, he forced you to end the pregnancy?
Yes.
And in different ways?
Multiple ways, yes.
What would he do?
He would kick me, he would punch me, he'll jump on my stomach, he'll knock me downstairs. He would literally take a barbell and hit me right in the stomach.
Her message was forgiveness. An amazing story to tell, and she found her voice. Another one of my top compelling interviews, to me, one of my favorites, is doing an interview with a man who had no voice and giving him the voice that he had found along the way. He fell into a coma. He was in a coma for years, but he was awake inside. They call it locked-in syndrome. He could hear what people were saying about him, including abuse, his mother at one point wishing he would die. He heard it all. And then he came out of his coma, and I got to talk to him, Martin Pistorius. The obstacle, the donkey, some of them were abusive. How did you survive that emotionally?
It was really tough. Being abused does something to you. It changes something inside of you. To this day, even though things are a lot better, I will still have nightmares and flashbacks. There are also times, especially if we are anywhere near to where the abuse took place, that I will get very anxious and into quite a state. I guess I survived by being able to work through all the emotions, accepting what happened, and also focusing on the future, rather than looking back at what happened.
Incredible perseverance, incredible passion. He's happily married, and he's a motivational speaker, the man without a voice. Passion, perseverance, and patience, and that was one of my favorite interviews of all time. I wanted to share with you a couple of moments where the block seemed to fall apart. We call them bloopers, and my producer put a couple of them together to take a look at. Hi, Val.
I just brought a little something for you guys. Hang on.
Hello.
If
How
you
much
can
do
hold
you
that,
love us?
hold that. The yellow diamond worth $2 to $3 million.
Look at that.
Isn't that gorgeous?
Okay, we've had a bit of a disaster. Okay, hold on. Am I allowed to pick it up?
Please.
Okay.
Outside snow today. This. Oh. Wait, a question I've asked my. Oh, sorry. Snow and clear. Glenn, follow me. Glenn, take me over because I want to stand behind Bev.
That's okay.
And tell you that's the weather.
Did you see your eyes pop out of your head?
On Canada AM.
Oh, this is
Would
going.
that be a hashtag fail?
Let me just try it one more time.
Okay,
Here we
watch
go.
your fingers,
I can
please.
tell you it worked in the office. Oh, now it's going the other way.
Okay.
This to me just proves that things on the
Okay,
internet
now just
aren't
let
true.
it go. Now do it. There you go.
We have extended interviews with all the Amazing Race teams on our website.
I'm still feeling sorry for the woman in the gym.
Oh.
Yeah, I think there was a guy.
Was that a woman?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a guy.
I think it was a
was.
guy.
Was it a guy?
I could tell because he wasn't wearing a shirt.
Right. I thought it was just a skin-colored shirt. She
Those
was
are some of the things we learned about nature and other things on the internet
somebody who
today.
needed the gym. Oh, maybe not.
Uh-oh.
Sometimes things don't always go as they're planned in live TV. But when I talk about the building blocks, when I talk about everybody pushing for curiosity, to find out more, to learn more, and to do more, there's one more quote that I want to bring you from an interview that I did with the 7th Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan. He said, "To live is to choose, but to choose well, you must know who you are and what you stand for, where you want to go, and why you want to get there." I think in those questions are the 3 Ps. Persevere, live your passion, and have the patience to make it through. Thank you.